studios of WDBO in sunny Orlando, Florida, here's talk radio host Joe Kelly's Behind the News podcast, where Joe and his listeners and guests discuss the most important issues of the day, plus the crazy and bizarre stories of the infamous Florida man. Here's Joe Kelly.
Hello.
Hey, Austin. This is Austin Valle joining us. And Austin is an Orange County Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor and the co-founder of Orlando YIMBY, not to be confused with NIMBY. YIMBY is Yes in My Backyard. It's an organization that advocates for housing, transit, and good urbanism. And Austin, you jumped on my radar with an op-ed that you wrote in the Orlando Sentinel. And as a downtown resident, I really connected with the editorial that you wrote. For those who didn't get a chance to read it, could you kind of sum up what your thoughts are from that editorial?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And I appreciate the chance to come and chat with you about it, Joe. The title of the piece is Downtown Orlando Has Too Many Cars and Not Enough People. And the basic premise is that, in my view, we as a region really think in not a productive way about our downtown. And what I mean by that is, in large part, to be kind of blunt with it, a lot of our leaders think of our downtown area as being, as I put it in the piece and elsewhere, as sort of just a parking lot for people who live in the suburbs. Right? People come, they do their business, they get out, they leave. Whereas really, downtown should be seen as probably the single most important neighborhood in the entire city, right? It's the lifeblood of our region. It's where everything is centralized. It's where the transit points towards. It's where our population is at its most dense. It really is the engine by which most of our region is powered. And in my view, it's not treated like that. And it's not treated like a major city should be, like many of the major cities that other people might be familiar with. So the piece really goes through examples of where, in my view, the downtown area has been let down by decisions, and what really we need to be looking at doing instead, which is pumping our city full of people and filling it with more housing and individuals and families and amenities and things that make it feel good to live in downtown, and not just make it such that we make it as quick and fast as possible to get in and get out. That's not how we build a beautiful neighborhood. Yeah, we really build it by investing in the people.
Anytime I talk about downtown on the radio, invariably I hear from a ton of people who tell me, I hate downtown. I never go to downtown. I mean, people just really don't seem to want to go to downtown Orlando unless they're dragged kicking and screaming to go there.
Yeah, there's I quote in the piece an urbanism, a woman who's kind of famous in urbanism circles. Her name is Jane Jacobs. And she says that you can't rely upon bringing people downtown, which is what you're getting at. You have to put them there, right? Our downtown could have double the amount of people living in it, right? We should be thinking in terms of 10,000, 20,000 more people living in downtown over the next 5-10 years to create a neighborhood for itself, so that we don't have to rely on begging people to come downtown. It can be self-sustained based just upon the people who live there, which is what you see in most other major cities in the U.S. and around the world.
I recently had the chance to spend a week in downtown Denver. We never left the downtown area. And I was really struck by how vastly different that urban area is compared to downtown Orlando. In that, I mean, their downtown area had all kinds of retail shopping. I mean, big retail shopping. They had a big REI right in the heart of downtown. They had restaurants of every imaginable kind. And then every now and again, you'd find a bar. Whereas in downtown Orlando, you'll find a bar at every block, every intersection, everywhere. Then there are smoke shops you'll find everywhere. Now, granted, Denver has legal marijuana, recreational marijuana. There were plenty of smoke shops in downtown Denver. In fact, I was told they even outnumber the number of Starbucks they have in downtown Denver. But we're still missing a lot. And watching that Walgreens close up in downtown Orlando, to me adds to that we're continuing to go down the wrong path.
That's where I was going to go as well. There's something I call a T-shirt test, which is, can you buy a T-shirt in your neighborhood? And in downtown Orlando, you'd be hard-pressed to find a T-shirt to buy. And now you'd be hard-pressed to buy toothpaste either, to your point. And so, I point in the piece to an analysis that was done that says that, believe it or not, and maybe if you walk around downtown, it's not surprising, 29% of our downtown central business district is dedicated to parking. right? And so instead of building out a neighborhood, we're flattening it and making it easy for people to come in and leave. And there's a number of empty lots and surface parking lots in our downtown. Now, these things take time, but what we want to see that fill with is residents, because those residents are who are going to be able to support your Walgreens, your CVS, your downtown Target. I mean, more and more you see these stores that are traditionally in suburban areas. I lived in Washington, D.C. for a few years, and there's a Target right in the middle of downtown. It's hard to think about that in our downtown, but with the right sort of investment, these things are completely possible. You don't have to go to Manhattan. You mentioned Denver. We should be comparing ourselves to cities like Denver and Charlotte and Atlanta and Nashville, and these things are totally within our reach.
We're talking to Austin Valle. He is on the Orange County Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor. He's the co-founder of Orlando YIMBY, which is an organization that advocates for housing, transit, and good urbanism. In downtown, one of the things I was so excited about with the expansion of the I-4 Ultimate project was Mayor Buddy Dyer had announced that they were going to build this magnificent park under I-4. Right there, between, say, the Amway Center down to Washington. And now we're told that plan is kaput, and instead it is going to be more parking spaces.
Yeah, that's right. More and more parking, right? I mean, to me, I think that project in particular was disappointing because at least if you ask someone like me, the widening of I-4 in the first place was a problem for downtown, right? It further took away land. That's going to go towards cars. That's an area that could have been used for something more productive. I-4 also really bisects downtown. It's east side from its west side. It's segregating our city in that way. And so this under I-4 park would have been an interesting way to bridge that divide in some sense. And instead we throw it away and we take the easy solution, the short-term solution, which is those bars, those establishments downtown say, hey, we need parking right now today. Can you change this to parking? And they said, yeah. Okay, yeah, let's do this in the short term. And we don't think about 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. There's a phrase, if you don't mind, I say this sometimes, which is that a city is a love letter from its current residents to its future ones. And I just think about decisions like that are so short-sighted. And what kind of downtown, what kind of city are we building for our children and our children's children and people who are going to move to Orlando 25 years from now? And the decisions that we make today really affect that. And I think it changes your point of view if you think about a long-term time horizon versus thinking about how do we solve a problem that we just have next month.
Now, lastly for you, they are building. There are a couple of high rises that are being built right now. There's a building that's being converted from business use to residential uses, and there do appear to be more housing projects going up in and around downtown. That certainly has got to be a reasonably good sign.
Yeah, it's always good to see something. The reality is that from start of a project to finish, you're really looking at something like 3 years. So this can, if we're not seeing a lot of cranes go up right now, we've got a ways to go. We want to be seeing a lot more go up. There was a project a few years ago where it was going to be across from Lake Eola, and some neighbors came out against it. So they blocked the development of a new apartment complex. And instead, it's just going to remain, they call it a park, but it's just some concrete slabs and some benches. That's what we don't want to see. And instead, that today could have been opening up as apartments. And so there's some going up, no doubt. But if you go to a city like St. Pete, there's significantly more amount of activity going on. And so I do worry about there's some happening, but there's not enough. And so what that means for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, we need to start seeing shovels go on the ground right now if we're going to see any real change in the next 5, 10 years.
And St. Pete is another great example of a great urban area, a great downtown that really has so much to offer, not just bars, not just places to get alcohol. How much do you think that the COVID pandemic has set back downtown Orlando? I know that we had a little bit more prior to the pandemic. We had a couple of extra restaurants, a couple of extra bars, a couple of extra retail spaces that have now closed since the pandemic. And I hazard to guess what the occupancy rate is of those commercial buildings in downtown Orlando.
Yeah, I'm by no means a commercial real estate expert, but I don't think it takes an expert to know that COVID is really going to affect a downtown that is really oriented towards office space. And so with the rise of working remote, even just some days of the week, that's really going to affect spaces like that. I just think it becomes more and more imperative that we think about a downtown neighborhood, not just as a place where people convene from 9 to 5, but really a living, breathing neighborhood that have people that are living there all the time. Maybe they're working remote from downtown, or they're living downtown and working downtown. That's the sort of neighborhood we want to build. And you pointed to places like Denver or St. Pete. That's what you see there is people live and they work downtown and they don't have to go travel elsewhere. I think as these downtown districts become more and more challenged in the commercial space, we're going to need to see that fill in with residential if we have any hope of avoiding a sort of downward spiral.
I think twice now I've said to you, this is my last question. Then I keep adding additional questions on because I find this to be such an interesting topic. But if someone is listening to this right now thinking, yeah, I agree with what those guys are saying, how does one best get involved? How does one best influence the mayor or the city council or the county or whoever is making the decisions for what downtown Orlando looks like?
Yeah, my view is that the most important form of politics is your local politics. If you need to know who your city commissioner is, your county commissioner. I think one way to get involved in the exact policy of it is, you mentioned at the beginning, I'm one of the co-founders of a group called Orlando YIMBY, which stands for Yes in My Backyard. And what Orlando YIMBY does is advocate for dense, what we call infill housing for transit. And so if you're interested in getting to know Orlando YIMBY or getting involved with Orlando YIMBY, just check out www.orlandoyimby.org. You can check out that organization. And just otherwise, make sure that your city commissioner is thinking about this. And people might not even realize that mayoral races and city commission races in the city of Orlando are on odd years. So we have a series of elections this November in 2023. The next ones will be in 2025. Make sure you vote in those. Make sure you get your voice heard. As you can imagine, turnout is much lower in those odd years than in the normal even years. And so your vote goes a lot further than it might typically. So make sure you're staying involved in local issues. This is where, your sewage, your trash, your streets, your sidewalks, your transit, your housing, that's where all those decisions are made. And so just make sure you're staying involved. And Orlando YIMBY is a good first step to make sure that happens.
Outstanding. Austin, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Joe.